So we decided to come together and have a chat about a future video series on our experiences as coaches and coach supervisors.
Yeah, this has been in the making for a long time. We've had many years of wine-fueled discussions, and that we should record that, or at least record a coherent something out of it. And this is after we had a discussion a couple of weeks ago, we kind of kicked ourselves into some action.
Yeah, reflecting on that discussion, I think, for me at least, the excitement I felt about the depth that you and I can go to in our conversations started to outweigh the anxiety that usually comes up for me around being recorded and, you know, putting myself out there. And also I kind of grew sick of procrastinating about making the video.
Yeah, well, and also that's also indicative of the things that we wanted to like talk about was getting into action and start doing things. I think something that we both have in common is that we like to spend a lot of time thinking, and often that that preference gets in the way of us actually turning our thinking into action. And so this was a perfect way for us to actually challenge ourselves with the topic that we want to talk about.
Yeah, I saw it as kind of a parallel of getting into action and making the video, along with exploring all the kind of stuff that happened for both of us that got in the way of making the video. And
yeah,
I think that sharing those experiences and sharing them in relation to something concrete that people can understand would be helpful to, you know, other practitioners out there. And I don't necessarily think that it just has to be coaches. It probably could be anybody who's developing some kind of business.
Yeah, and I remember when we did our coach supervision training together, something that really struck me at that time was that process of discussing with a professional about your own experiences. I was thinking that kind of experience could be beneficial to anybody, anybody that has a connection with another human, getting to understand what's underlying that. So it's, I think, linking into that, it's this isn't just, I mean, this is stuff that we found useful for ourselves. So being able to talk about it, and hopefully if it rings for somebody, then great, then regardless of what their context is.
Yeah, and it's not that we're professing to have the answers.
No.
But it's relating what our experiences are and hopefully giving people some tools to understand their own experiences.
Yeah. I think we're by no means the completely sorted humans. We're still, well, at times I'm still blundering my way through my own life and
works in progress.
Yeah, exactly. I love one of our colleagues recently on social media put a picture up saying you can both be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time.
Yeah. Well, every masterpiece, I guess, was a work in progress at some point.
Yeah.
So how about we give people a little bit of background on each other so that they know where we're coming from?
Sure.
So when you say that, or do you want to start?
And when you say that, are you going to introduce me, or do you want me to introduce myself?
Oh wow, that'd be interesting. Yeah, why don't we introduce the other? You better get it right now.
Oh dear. Sure. Okay. So let me. I'll introduce Alex van Oostfearn. He's a trained coach and a coach supervisor. Before that, he was a pilot in the South African Air Force, flying choppers. And during his process in the Air Force, got exposed to a modality called transactional analysis, and through that also found some connections with coaching, and through the Air Force was able to do coach training, which got him onto his next career path, which is coach and coach supervisor. Alex's ongoing learning is in transactional analysis, but is obviously curious about many different facets in life and how they link into his greater awareness of how he is and how he fits in the world, and how he can use that in working with his clients.
Yeah, sounds like a great guy. Thanks.
Yeah, he's pretty damn cool.
Slip the 50 digitally. Thanks. Yeah, so I know you in two different ways, like socially and through a professional connection as well that I have in the Air Force, or had in the Air Force before I left. So what I remember from your history before coaching is that you told me you were a swimming coach, and then you got interested in coaching, and you and I first met when you did your coach training here in Cape Town. And that coach training was based on TA, so I think you've got like from the start an integration of transactional analysis and your coaching practice, and then your supervision practice as well, which we did together. And you have spent your years since your initial coach training in deepening your own knowledge of TA, primarily. You applied in your personal life. A lot of our conversations refer back to TA concepts. Yeah, you are a freelance coach. You work with individuals in a private capacity, as well as within organizations, and the same for your coach supervision, as I understand it. You're based in Pretoria in South Africa.
Yeah.
And you're involved as a mental coach for ICF accredited coach training as well. That happens both here in South Africa as well as north of the border, Ireland, to name one, and I think the UK as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, which you are obviously involved in as well. Having started your wearing that mentoring hat in South Africa.
Yeah, you're an avid cyclist, and fitness is important to you.
Yeah, fitness is my place where I can figure out the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. What else? What did I leave out that's important to you for people to hear?
I think you got a good spread of it all, and I think more to come as we explore. And from your side, what did I miss out?
I think you gave it a very good synopsis. I think all that would be remaining really is something that's relatively new to me. I come from a background which is very scientifically based. Obviously, the aviation field is all about planning down to the finest detail. and understanding what it is that you're doing with reference to either aviation law or to scientific principles in aerodynamics. So for me, a large part of my personal development is about expanding my thinking outside of that. So not putting it away and discounting its usefulness. And I find TA is very useful to make the psychodynamic concepts and phenomena that occur within people and between people tangible, because it relates it to models which are expressed graphically, or let's rather say visually, or in text.
Yeah.
So I would say that's, in my mind at least, kind of leaning into the science side of things. But my recent exploration has been more metaphysical and holistic. So it's about understanding experiences, not with relation to traditional psychological concepts, but more spiritual or metaphysical ones. And sometimes I think for people who are more scientifically minded, that's hard to get your mind around, because the language that you would use to describe those things doesn't necessarily make sense, or it might be difficult to relate to. So for instance, Eckhart Tolle talks about having a pain body, for instance, which is not necessarily a scientific concept, and you probably wouldn't be able to prove it with science either. But it's a metaphor which can work very well for people's healing. And so this is something that I'm interested in expanding my awareness of, and my use of, not only for myself, but in my practice with coaching clients and supervision clients.
Yeah.
And I think I've shared it maybe a little bit with you about that.
Yeah, I was going to say we've had quite a few discussions actually around this, and it's been great to hear your thinking, especially because our relationship was based on you so significantly relating to the scientific structures. So how you bring that kind of your flavor of an analytical mind into exploring something new, and that permission that you give to yourself to be open to it. And it's been really wonderful to hear about the resources that you come across, and hear how it's updating or challenging your thinking.
Thank you. And I think what I appreciate a lot about my conversations with you is that I can often get stuck there in the kind of rational scientific way of thinking about things. And I always find with you, you bring balance, and you might give me an observation, like, I'm noticing this happening between us, and that helps me escape it. And a lot of my awareness of self, so personal development awareness, has come from those conversations. So thank you for that as well.
Thanks. I didn't really know that.
Now I know it.
Now I know it.
So shall we talk a little bit about how we envisage future episodes of our conversations to go?
Yeah. I was thinking maybe saying a bit more about what is it that we want to be talking about would be a useful place to start. So maybe focusing a bit more on what we said in the beginning of that idea of our trigger was talking about our own experiences of noticing when we get stuck on putting things into action, and then what's helped us put it into action. That was the main catalyst, was to say, well, let's explore that more. Let's talk about it. Let's share it. Let's delve into it and test it and see how things work.
So for me, having come from having an employer to being self-employed and having to really manage all aspects of the business that I'm in, a lot of the learning has been technical. So things like how to set up client scheduling and accounting and all that kind of thing, which is obviously a challenge, learning something technically new. And also very significant, probably more significant kind of learning for me has been about my approach to my practice and the experiences that I have in relation to learning something new or getting to a task and voicing that out loud now. A specific area of that comes to mind is interpersonal relationships in business. So not necessarily the relationships that I have in a session with a client, but in business relationships, in engagements for voluntary tasks that I do. And sometimes those are quite difficult. Sometimes the problems to solve can be overwhelming. And specifically in those cases, it's hard to work around the overwhelm.
When you say about overwhelm, just to clarify, is it around the interpersonal stuff, or is it the mandate of those different roles?
I just want to check that I understand your question right. When you say the mandate of the roles, what do you mean?
Yeah, so like when you sit on a committee and the committee has got a terms of reference, is it the overwhelm relating to the output that the committee is required to make, or is it the resulting interpersonal stuff that happens in trying to make that stuff work?
That's such a good question. I would imagine that they're interlinked, and I'd say both. My thinking about the interpersonal relationship side of things is knowing that people have different styles of working can present a point of conflict or misunderstanding or different approaches to the same task. Sometimes people's personal stuff gets in the way of the relationship and the task.
Yeah.
And if that happens enough times, because we're conditioned to then expect more from that same kind of person, it builds up a resistance to wanting to work with them.
Yeah.
Some maybe a fear even, or a procrastination in working with them, or even addressing what those issues are. And that might not be a challenge for everybody, but it's certainly been a challenge for me.
Yeah.
And then with regards to the mandate, I think that, like in your example of working in a committee, whether it's a professional body or an NGO or whatever it is, those committees exist, I think, because they need to have some form of output. And those things can be overwhelming indeed because of their complexity, because the output is dependent on external factors like legislation, compliance. So you can't really be an expert at all of those things. And one more idea that I've just had before I hear your own thoughts is, I'm wondering if some of these are particular to the voluntary environment, because you're not always engaged with those specific tasks. where one might become an expert quicker if, for instance, you were being paid for the work, it's part of your daily job, you could be more familiar with what you're working with. But in a voluntary environment, you only touch on these things from time to time, and the learning might be slower.
Yeah. Yeah. So from my own experience, there was a couple of things that I was relating to. What was coming for me in particular was noticing my own stuff. So when my own stuff gets in the way. So I know that my own preferences are around wanting to get things right, and also make sure those around me are happy. So it's to use some like, I'm only okay if I'm getting things right and others are happy. So that can, and then that really can get in my way of doing things, engaging with others. And I'm absolutely sure, I don't know how to quantify it yet, but when you throw in the volunteer aspect to it, or even I've had times where I've coached in organizations where they themselves are a non-profit, and they want to kind of give a token of appreciation for your effort. That in itself also starts to blur the lines of, am I actually being paid to do this, or is it like what is this really about? And then that's also there's any kind of murkiness in that water, it's a breeding ground for my stuff to get hooked, and for other people's stuff to get hooked into that murkiness as well. So it's just so important to be able to have some kind of ability to hold things at arm's length and reality check, going, where does my stuff start and end, and where does others start and end, and how do we actually move through the stuff to get our jobs done? Because we still, that's inevitably why we're engaged with stuff, is that we want to get outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the intended purposes of our video series, is by relating our own experiences to easily understandable frameworks like transactional analysis that at least you and I are familiar with, but there might be others as well. We're understanding the different elements of our experiences with more clarity, more insight, understanding the personal context of why we get hooked by certain things and how to work around that. And I think almost all of those frameworks will provide some options to do things differently, to do different kinds of problem solving. And that's what you and I want to share with our viewers.
Yeah. Something that was I was tickling my brain a bit about when hearing you say that is what I noticed for a long time of learning about different modalities or tools that help me make sense of things, is that if you're not, well, I wasn't careful. So what I did is I started to use that my preference to think and the understanding of those models as gaining more evidence of how I'm doing it wrong. And what I've seen in others who might have a different sets of ways of being, is that they might use that theoretical knowledge to create more portfolios of evidence of why others are doing it wrong. And I think that's something that's really important here, is that it's not about who's doing it right or wrong. It's about having a bit more sense of what's happening, and linking to what you said at the end is, what's the tactic that's coming out? What's the way, the awareness or the option or opportunity to do it differently?
Yeah. So are you talking about recognizing patterns of thinking and feeling and behavior in self. And so it's not really as much about the circumstances as it is about those different elements of one's being and existence in the world, and figuring out which of those patterns are serving us and which are not.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, and then also, if necessary, how does that give you some insight in what others are doing around you? Again, not to fault find them, but rather to maybe understand what's the dynamic to change how you interact with that person or that situation.
I imagine that understanding would be particularly useful to coaches and supervisors, because they would be able to contextualize their own clients' stories, and perhaps even share the models with their clients so that they could understand the stories themselves. It's quite empowering.
Yeah, I think, and also this the concept of parallel process, that when we work with others, the patterns have a sneaky way of swimming upstream, and before you know it, there's a chance that you're acting out with that person a pattern that they're struggling with themselves. So you're all of a sudden becoming a character in this pattern. So when you're able to understand it, or at least have some insight of, oh goodness, here it comes, especially when you're a coach or a coach supervisor, it's so important to be able to recognize the parallel process and say, how do I positively engage with this? How do I make a difference to have a lived experience in the here and now of a better way of doing it?
So when you say positive experience, how would that serve as an effective response to whatever that dynamic is?
Can you answer that in a different way?
Yeah. So you talked about, in parallel process, some of the stuff swims upstream. And so as I understood that, the things that are going on for the practitioner's client might start then happening between the client and the practitioner themselves, and the practitioner becomes a part of that dynamic. But, either as a coach or a supervisor, being able to recognize that one is becoming a part of what actually belongs to the client, you could choose to respond to that in a more effective way, as opposed to being subject to those dynamics.
Yeah.
And so I wondered, what would the downstream swimming look like, and how would it impact people's lives?
Sure. So the two things that come to mind is, depending on what is the contract between those people, might inform at what how explicit you work with it. So potentially, as at least how I like to work as a coach supervisor, is contracting explicitly about, is my client happy for us to comment and work with what's happening between us in the here and now. So I might be very explicit and say, how interesting, because I feel like I'm the one that's being asked to rescue you now. So that's quite explicit. Whereas if I'm working as a coach and my client, the contract isn't there about me sharing models or something like that, working on that more explicit level, I might, it'll update the way how I'm curious with that client, the way I ask questions, or decide to whether how I balance the support and challenge in that moment. Yeah, those are the things that came to mind.
So I'm wondering about, in our conversation, not necessarily going further in depth about the parallel process, but touching on a topic that we might explore in another episode, being working differently in coaching when you're the coach to how one would work in supervision as perhaps both the supervisor and the supervisee. And you just touched on that now, talking about models and naming things explicitly.
Yeah.
Should we go there?
Sure. Something that I think we both agree that the coach supervision is often misunderstood as it's just coaching for coaches, and it's distinctly not. There might be certain coaching skills that are used in a coach supervision space, but it's there as part of the tools to get to the actual outcome. And so the coach supervision space is around working with a coach and being curious about things like why am I not able to do what I know I should be doing with this particular client or this type of client. Or another trigger question is around, where is my personal stuff getting hooked in my professional space, and what is that about? So that's in the coach supervision space. So it's looking at how am I keeping myself sorted so I can be of the best value to my client.
You cut out a little bit there. So I just want to check what you said.
Sure.
It's how your personal stuff gets hooked by the client stuff.
So what I think I said was so my personal stuff is getting in the way of my professional stuff.
Okay.
So my
Yes,
potentially.
that is what you said.
Okay. So and this is very easily, it happens all the time because we're human, we're empathic beings. So a client might be talking about their struggle with a bullying team member, and maybe I have another story in my life where I was bullied, and it's natural to potentially pick up that storyline. But actually, in that process, it's really important that you don't, because your story is your story and their story is theirs, and you need to join them in their exploration of how they're going to make sense of their life and move forward, and not imprint your stuff on theirs.
Yeah, so I imagine when you're able to distinguish between what's yours and theirs, there's an element of personal development that's happening in line with that. And for me, that awareness often comes through supervision.
Yeah.
And then in practice with your engagement with clients.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Well, I mean, I said quite a bit about my thinking of the difference. What's your thinking?
What I found useful in the past is understanding the context of the work and what the desired impact of the work is, both in coaching and in supervision. So within coaching, the client, the person receiving the coaching, doesn't necessarily need to understand the theories and models that come along, or not necessarily come along with being human, but that help us to make sense of being human. From time to time, I think it might be useful, but I think the desired outcome of that work is some kind of change in the client, where they can experience a shift in their thinking and a shift in their behavior, and as a consequence, a shift in they feel about certain things.
Yeah.
But they won't necessarily need to apply theories and frameworks and models in their own professional life.
Mm.
But in supervision, where a coach is being supervised, because the context of the coach's work, where they will have to apply theories and models and frameworks professionally, it is important to explicitly talk about those. And they serve as a vehicle for processing what experiences the coach has with their own clients, even what experiences the coach has with the supervisor, what experiences the coach has in their approach to their practice. So it's not just case studies, it's how am I approaching my practice? What am I noticing within myself that's a challenge, or things that are going well?
Yeah. I like that what you said there about it's not. I mean, case studies can be useful, but it's not only about case studies. What I've noticed is that if both in my own being supervised and also working in supervising others, it's almost like too much case study is a vehicle to fault finding. So back to what I'd said earlier about using models, it's like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, or this person's uncoachable. Actually, that just doesn't help the system or anyone in it. So it is the vehicle, or it is a potential vehicle to having insights about what's the underlying stuff. And that's where that the key issue is. So coach supervisors will talk about what is the key issue underlying this. So when we identify that, we're able to engage with sustainable transformation into how you want to be showing up as that coach.
So not just a bit of problem solving in a supervision session that solves a specific issue with a client or a sponsor or an element of practice, but it's a paradigm shift that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Shift in thinking, a shift in being that enables you to not only solve that problem, but a wider variety of problems.
Yeah, exactly. And linking into that topic again of it's not just about different thinking and different understanding, it's about different doing behavior.
All part of the package of being human.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling like we're starting to come full circle here, because a lot of the awareness that you and I have explored in our personal conversations, and that we're hoping to explore more in the video series, for me at least, has emerged from supervision, from being able to understand myself better. And this is what we're hoping to share with people going forward.
Being able to identify certain topics that potentially you would need a dedicated piece of time to explore, to talk about, maybe share a piece of theory, but then also bring some story into it, to breathe some life into it, to make it tangible. But at other times, maybe we talking about a collection of like quick go-to tactics that you can try out, or that we've tried out. I think that's the more important thing, is what have we tried out, and like this worked, or this really didn't fit for me at all. And seeing how those kind of come together as coherent topics.
Yeah. And my own experience has been that a specific model might not necessarily be relevant to something that I'm experiencing as a challenge or difficulty or a source of anxiety in my life. and it's being able to access like a library of models and theories which are relevant to the topic. That's helpful. So I think as we progress and we focus in and do deep dives into some experiences and topics, those may or may not resonate with what people are experiencing, but they'll give people something to access in the range of their experiences in life.
Yeah. I must say, as we're wrapping up now, I'm starting to feel that excitement again about the opportunity.
Yeah, me too. And I'm looking forward to more conversations with you, because you stimulate my thinking and my awareness of self so well.
Yeah, that's why I enjoy that. And I really enjoy how we're challenging each other more to not just stay in our comfort place of thinking. And so how we bringing that into reality, that's making it come alive.
Yeah. Well, thanks for this introductory conversation, and I hope to see our viewers engage with us as well, and feel free to offer what your own experiences are, what your challenges are, that could serve as a good fuel for thought and action and exploration.
Exactly. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.